Welcome to The Jewish Lens, a podcast to discuss anything and everything from a Jewish perspective. Now, please help me welcome the man who controls the media, your host, Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen, and today I am thrilled to welcome someone who's a lactation consultant and birth educator at Well Pregnancy. Her written work has been, featured in such places as Feller and The Forward. She's the author of Hidden in Plain Sight, a Family Memoir, and the Untold Story of the Holocaust in Serbia. Please help me welcome Julie Brill. Julie, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan. I'm really glad to be here.
Well, we have a lot to cover, and we're going to get to the book, I promise, but I want to start by going back with you. I spoke to you a little bit before we started. So you were born in Philadelphia, but grew up in Boston, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's Boston
Okay.
suburbs.
All
Exactly.
right. So what was your family life like in general, and also, I guess, in particular with regard to Judaism? And I ask everyone this when they come on. So
Yeah. So I was growing up in the 1970s and 80s, my younger brother and I, and my dad is Israeli. So Shabbat was the big thing. Friday night there would be candles and challah. We did all the holidays. So not religious per se, but certainly culturally there doing all the things. Yeah.
not very much religious. So did you observe things like in the general sense, like outside of like holidays and everything?
I mean, we did holidays. We went to Hebrew school when I was little. We were part of a Reform congregation in the next town over. The little town that I grew up in didn't really have much of a Jewish
Jewish
community.
presence? And now, before we get to the book, also right now, because I read all about the things where your father's from. So where's your mother from originally? Which area and everything? Where's her family?
Yeah, my mother's actually from Boston. My grandmother was actually born in Boston, so we go back here over a hundred years.
Wow, wow.
Yeah, her family came from Ukraine, part of that big wave in the turn of the last century, but she was the youngest child and she was actually born afterwards. She was born here. So there was a big gap. The other children were born in Ukraine and she was born here.
And
And
you go
yeah,
ahead, sorry.
sorry. I was just going to say my maternal grandfather was born in what was Russia and is now Poland and came here as a child.
So you grew up
So,
knowing everything on your mother's side. Your mother was very open
correct.
about everything where she was from.
Yes. Yes, I knew my grandparents, I knew my cousins.
And so, sorry, so you just told me what her history was. So as a kid, did you question your dad didn't talk about much of his background, right? That's as far as what I'm getting at.
My dad did. I mean, so my dad came from Israel. I mean, he wasn't born there, but he came here from Israel. He'd served in the IDF and he was very much Israeli in my mind. We had a lot of Israeli family friends that we knew. And I knew that there was something further back in Yugoslavia, but I didn't know a lot about it.
Did you question? That's one of the things I was curious about when I was looking through everything. Did you question things, or just did he not want to talk about things?
So he was willing to talk. I mean, I know there's some Holocaust survivors, their families
Right.
where they never knew the story. I very much knew my father's stories,
Mhm.
but my father was born in 1938, so his stories were the stories of a very young child.
Wow.
And he would tell them, and I would listen hard. Like I always knew they were important, these stories of what happened in the war, but they were a child's perspective. So I never knew the broader picture of how they fit in or what had happened in the war
Did he know everything?
historically.
I mean, from what kid I mean, he knew things, but did he know everything leading up to? So did he like? Was it something that he talked about? That or the Holocaust itself? Not necessarily his family, but did he talk about things in the Holocaust himself? Because, like you just said a minute ago, not everyone did like to talk about it.
Right. I mean, he was willing to talk about it, and he had these like snapshot memories, or these little things would come out about things that his mother had told him. So I knew that his father had been murdered very early in the war.
Mm.
The war came very early to Yugoslavia. So by the early 1942, most of the Jews in Belgrade, where my father is from, were already murdered. And I knew these little stories that he told. He's got one where he would like look out the window. His mother told him not to, but he would sneak these glances. He wanted to see the German soldiers that were patrolling the Jewish neighborhood. So he was like watching, but he was three, so he didn't have the context for it. And we didn't have the context for what had happened in Yugoslavia. It's very different than Poland or Germany, or, we learned about Anne
Mhm.
Frank and Holland. And so I
Right.
could never fit his memories into the bigger story until I really did this deep dive for the book.
Did you like to write as a kid at all? I'm just curious. No.
I really like to read. I read everything. I mean, this is before like cell phones, right? So I went everywhere with a book. Like maybe there would be 5 minutes to, read something. I love to read, and I
What
did
were some of your
try to
favorites?
write.
Just curious.
Oh, the Little House on the Prairie books, all of them over and over again. All of the Kind Family, which I thought was like the
That,
Jewish Little House on the Prairie.
that seems to be a very popular
Um,
answer when I ask people. Yeah.
I mean, I love them, all the different girls, and I read them over and over again. So as I got older, I identified with the older girls in the story. I love Secret Garden. I all the Judy Blume books. I mean, I just would go down the shelves in our library and devour them.
But you didn't necessarily take to writing as a kid. That came
I
later.
mean, I had notebooks. I would like try to write, a story. Today I woke up, right? Then I ate breakfast. Like it's not a story you would want to read.
When did you get into writing? Only when this started coming about?
Well, so I really started in college. I took some creative writing classes. Like you said in the introduction, I'm a lactation consultant and a doula, and I have another book related to that. So I was
I'm
doing
gonna ask
some
about that
writing.
too. Yes.
Yeah, but never memoir. And my plan was not to write a memoir. My plan was to write the story of the Jews of Serbia. My family in the center, and then how it fit into the larger
Right.
story of the Jewish community. I am American. I was born here. I was not planning to put myself in the book, so I'm like a reluctant memoirist. But all the early feedback was, you have to be the main character. We need to see it through your eyes.
Right.
You uncover it and explain it to us. And so that's what the book is like.
So talking to your dad, so you were not familiar with all the things, and you got a general sense. When did you first start realizing that there's like a much bigger story, I guess, than the things that you had grown up learning about or whatever, that there was much more to what he was saying or what he even remembered?
Yeah, so I think it's really typical, children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, unlike everyone else, maybe. We learn the very specific family stories and then we learn the larger context. How does
Mhm.
this fit into what happened in the war? In my case, I just sort of thought we are the only people this happened to because nobody talked about it. And the
Right.
stories that my father was telling me didn't make sense if you know Germany and Poland. So, we're learning about cattle cars in Hebrew school, and he's like, no, my mother would walk to the camp where my father was held. It
Yeah,
was
I
in the
saw
middle
that.
of the
That's
city.
incredible to me. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and just like I'm like, what? That doesn't sound like what was that a different Holocaust? Like what was happening? And then finally, in middle age, my kids are grown, 2017, I've got the empty nest and I started to do the research. And really, a lot of what I researched in terms of family documents had only been available for a very short time. These archives, they're being opened. There's more and more information all the time.
So, okay, did you discuss with your family? I mean, also with him that you wanted to do research more about
Yes.
history and where he's from?
Very much so. And every little nugget, every piece of information I could deliver to him, he was fascinated. And it's fascinating because everything he reported was true. I could fit what he had told me into the larger narrative. And I think usually you think, oh, well, like parents tell their children the story. And I was really like passing it back up to my father. The Nazis stole that from him. He didn't know the larger story. And here it is. Here's our family story, and here's how it fits
So
into
he
the
was he
larger
was not
narrative.
reluctant at all to go dive deeper into anything.
He's always been a willing partner. I think as he's gotten older and there are unfortunately just fewer survivors. I mean, it's really
Right.
just the child survivors that are left. I think he's felt also there's more importance in telling the story. For
Responsibility.
me,
Yeah.
yeah, it was like if someone else would tell the story of Serbia, I wouldn't have to, but there are so few survivors and descendants. This book hasn't been written. No one has told this story.
So can we talk some about Belgrade itself? What was that's where your dad's family was from.
Correct.
Right. So what happened there with regard to the history of the Jewish people? How was it before things happened? How was it, how did it impact everything there? So what, because you're
Yeah.
saying that there was so little known about its history with regard to that.
Exactly. So I love that you asked about before. I think the before is as important, maybe more important. Um, there were Jews in Belgrade before there were Serbs. There were Jews there, Sephardic Jews, almost immediately after they left Spain and Portugal. That was one of the places they settled. It was a strong Sephardic community.
Mhm.
The first printing press in Ladino was actually in
Wow.
Belgrade. Who knew? And then a newer wave of Ashkenazi Jews came in the 1800s. My family actually has roots in both those communities,
Mhm.
and they were very separate communities. They spoke separate languages, of course. They had separate synagogues, they had separate cemeteries, they did not intermarry. There were these very separate Jewish communities, Ashkenazi and
And
Sephardic. And
to some extent,
only
it's still like that today, actually.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
now it's such a small community. There's only one synagogue in Belgrade.
I'm not talking
Everybody
about
goes
Belgrade. I'm talking
there.
about in general, like, Sephora.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
the separateness.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very true. There's this thriving community. There is the neighborhood in the center called Dorchel, which is the Jewish community. Not a ghetto. This is like from the Ottoman Empire, so there's no gate. They're
Mhm.
not required to live there. They just
Right.
like to live together. And the street where my father actually lived, there's a synagogue, of course. There's an Orthodox church. The Serbs in general are Serbian Orthodox Christians, and there's a mosque. So it's a very diverse community overall, and the Serbs are welcoming of the Jews into that community by the time my grandfather comes along. He was born in 1909. So he actually thought, hey, I'm a Serb first and then a Jew. Had Serbian friends, spoke Serbian, all of that. And that's a little bit of the pre-war thing.
Hmm.
Um, then the king of Yugoslavia made a pact with Germany, like an alliance pact, a non-aggression pact. And the people were furious. They did not want to ally themselves with Germany. They stopped going to work. They were on strike. They were in the streets. And they actually got rid of that king and put his nephew in place. He was not the heir to the throne. He was holding the position because his nephew was too young. He
Right.
was a teenager. And they said, okay, you're old enough. You are now running Yugoslavia. Get rid of this pact. And he did. And Hitler was so angry. So there was a surprise bombing of Belgrade in April 1941. No one was expecting it. People thought it might be an air show. And that's actually my father's earliest memory. He remembers bombs making this whistling sound, and he and his mother are running through the street to the bomb shelter. That was like his foundational memory.
So that was really the beginning of Germany taking foothold there.
Yes, very much so. So they bomb the city. The bombing is for 3 days. They know where the bomb shelters are because there was a turncoat, so they're targeting those shelters. They know where the Jewish neighborhood is, Dorchel, where my family is. They're targeting that. There are no military targets. They bomb the library. They bomb the zoo. It's terrible. And then they come in on the ground within a couple of weeks. And one of the first things they do is they round up the Jewish men.
So it's right up
And
right at the beginning, right after the bombing. They start invading.
they started invading. We're talking April 1941. I mean, the US didn't even come into the war until December of
Right.
41 with Pearl Harbor. So this is very early. People don't know really. I mean, they know fascism is bad. They know the Jews are in danger, but the Holocaust has really only just started.
Hmm.
They don't really understand what's happening. And there's a picture, I'm sure my grandfather is in it. It gets blurry, but I can't see his face. But all of the Jewish men and teenage boys are rounded up in this old fort in the center of the city, Kalamagdan, and they are registered and they start work immediately. We have a street pass. My grandfather was on a crew with his neighbors, and they were digging ditches. They were fixing the sewer system because the bombing
No
had
outcry
just
from the rest
destroyed
of the
it.
village or anything like that.
Sorry?
No outcry from the rest of the village at all, though.
I mean, it's hard to know what was
Right.
happening. The street pass that we have is in Serbian, so clearly there's a lot of, local collaboration. There's also a lot of resistance. Eventually, there's the partisans that rise
Mhm.
up that Tito is leading. So it's unusual. My grandfather was able to stay at home
Right.
with
Yeah.
my
Keep going. Yeah.
grandmother, yeah, and my father, and it was slave labor. He had to report for work every day. They weren't paying him hard physical labor, but he came home at night for months, which was another part of the story that always confused
Yeah.
me.
It's
You don't
amazing.
hear that.
Incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then around the time of my father's third birthday, he doesn't come home. And that's a memory my father has too. So my grandmother is pregnant and she's screaming and crying and wailing. Of course, she thinks he's dead. And there's no way to know. I mean, there's a curfew. She can't go outside. They don't have a phone. They don't have a radio, right? So what they don't know what's happened. But what had happened was the Jewish men were now being held in the center of the city in this camp. And I mean, we have a letter from the Jewish community. They're begging for straw. Could these men please have straw so they don't have to sleep on the ground? I mean, they had nothing. They didn't have food. They
Oh.
weren't given anything. And the Jewish women in the community had to bring them what they needed to survive. And my grandmother did that, brought him food, brought him socks. I just imagine like the basics of what he might need to get by.
Why was so little known? I mean, because I'm very into history. I taught history, and I eat it up a lot. And so, why is so little known about this particular like, region and things that happened there? Like, because I was shocked when saw the things that that they were allowed to come home at first and then receive, I guess, visitors. So,
Right.
is that I mean, I'm just curious why is so little known about that area?
I mean, I've asked myself that question a lot. Timothy Snyder talks about the Auschwitz paradox.
Hmm.
So the reason that Auschwitz has gotten so much attention, I mean, horrific place, death camp, obviously, but the scale at which it happened, right? Over 1 million Jews are murdered there. So we think of it as a place of death, rightly so. But there are tens of thousands of young Jewish survivors, mostly in their teens and 20s, who survive Auschwitz because it was also work camps and they tell their stories. And so we know what happened there. Um, there were so few survivors in
Oh,
Belgrade. 90% were murdered by the spring of 1942.
oh wow.
Hitler's declaring it Judenfrei, it's free of Jews. Many of the Jews who survived were able to join the partisans, young men, but also young women. But of course, many of them died fighting, as fighters. So there were just very few survivors. You need survivors and descendants to be able to tell a story.
Oh well. So right as soon as they took hold, there was like first started rounding, and then the murder started murdering pretty much. It seems like almost instantaneous. So for within a year.
Yeah, so the timeline is the war starts in April. Jews are immediately registered. The men are in camps by August, and mostly they're all murdered, the men, by November. And
Oh,
we actually, in my research, I found my grandfather's death date, which we didn't know. Now we have a yahrzeit date. Um, but what my grandmother knew was that she went one day to the camp. The camp was empty. The gates were open. No one was there. My grandfather disappeared, literally disappeared. And the rumors were, I mean, they actually make more sense than the actual reality. The rumors were they had moved these men to work somewhere else for the Reich. And my grandfather was in his early 30s, so that made sense. My grandmother believed that. The reality was that every time a German soldier was shot by the partisans, they murdered 100 men. And every time one was wounded, they murdered 50. And so they just went through the Jewish population that they had in this camp in this kind of retribution killings.
man. So when you first started doing research, so you first started the research with the idea of a book, or you just started researching your family's history first, and then just later on the
Yeah.
idea came.
First, I was like, I want to give this to my father. I want to understand. I have two daughters. I want to pass down this history. I have a niece
Right.
and a nephew. Could we finally understand what Papa's stories mean?
Right.
How do these fit in? And then I realized the importance of it. And we did 3 trips to Serbia with my father and my daughters. I really realized this is more than just for my family. This is like something I want to give to the community at large.
I'm going to get to the trips in a second. There, I just curious. During the research, did you discover anything, I guess, that really surprised you or your dad? I mean, did you discover maybe even like I was just curious, like while looking through all this, that even relatives that you didn't know that you had or something?
Yes, yeah. So there are some things that were secrets that I don't want to reveal that it would be spoilers for the
Okay.
book, but I can say we found family we didn't know we had.
Mhm.
So documents of family members who had died, of course, but also living family who now we have
Oh,
met, which just feels like this amazing gift. They
that's
didn't know
cool.
about us and we didn't know about them, and they had other documents and photos. And so we've been really able to kind of fill in what happened.
What an amazing thing to have happen, really. Discover. So right away, so the decision was made to go to Serbia, like almost right away after the research?
I started researching in 2017. The first trip was in 2018, like to my dad, hey, you want to go to Serbia? My dad's almost 80 at that point. And he was totally game for it. I mean, I had always wanted to go.
Hmm.
As a kid, it felt like Oz, like this magical place you couldn't get to. There was the Iron Curtain, there was the Cold War. We didn't speak Serbian. My dad came here and worked, 16 hours days. He just worked like an immigrant. There wasn't time, there wasn't money. There were the Balkan Wars, so many obstacles. And then there's this opportunity, and we can just like get on a plane and fly there. And that sounds like maybe dumb, but it just didn't seem like a place you could really visit. And of course it is. So that was just amazing. And to go with my dad, I mean,
Right.
to be able to go back to his hometown with him was phenomenal.
What was that experience like for him?
I think it was really, uh, I think he was really moved by it. He new memories surfaced, so place can elicit memory. We were
Sure.
standing on the street outside the hotel, and he just gave us a memory I'd never heard before, about his aunt who had lived across the street. That was phenomenal. He knows that city inside out. So at one point, we're with a guide, and the car just dies. And we've made this circuitous route around the city, and I think we're really far from the hotel. And my dad is like, we're getting out. We're walking now. And he just like, we weren't that far. And he just made a beeline for the hotel. He has the whole map of the old city in his brain still. So to be able to see that and get to know him in a different way was really
When did he come?
remarkable.
When did he come to the States anyway? How old was
He
he?
came here in 1964, but they went to Israel in
Okay.
1948.
When did fine. So he was still his memories were okay then because he was a little bit older than there, so he still had some. That's really amazing. So when you were
Yeah.
there, just how difficult was it, I guess, to find information while you were there? Were people helpful? Were people evasive, like not wanting to discuss it? Not wanting to discuss their history? I'm just curious, like how were the general population now?
Yeah, so we definitely got more information from family there than we had before. And just connecting with family was amazing. Everybody was so warm and welcoming. And I realized, like, oh, we're Serbian. We also like fit in here. That was amazing. The government of Serbia has been very reluctant to
Sure, I was
acknowledge
wondering.
what has happened. They had their own genocide in Bosnia, so it's been very complicated. And that has been frustrating is maybe an understatement.
How
Um,
how much of a is there a Jewish presence now at all in the within the town?
there is a very small but mighty Jewish presence. Yes, they run a synagogue, and they have a Jewish community center, and they do some education, and kosher meals, and community events. So there are people there who very much are claiming that heritage, and wanting to learn more a lot of times, because of course when communism came in, a lot of people lost what they knew about their family's religions.
So, but the people themselves within the town were helpful.
Yes, everyone we met on a personal level was remarkable, was warm and welcoming. I mean, I think
And they
Serbia
knew
has a
what you were
lot.
doing. I'm just curious. That's what.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think it's threatening on an individual level. I was surprised at how welcomed we are. But we flew into the airport, and it's the Nikola Tesla airport. I mean, we think of him as like an American immigrant, right? He
Right,
came
right.
from Serbia. So there's like a long history of people leaving Serbia for all kinds of reasons and being welcomed home. It's the government that's the issue.
So, tell me a little bit about the book itself, Hidden in Plain Sight. So, how long did it take to do and complete? And also let's talk about when it's coming out.
Yeah. So, I mean, in a sense, I feel like I've been writing this book always, like, collecting the stories. But I really started in 2017. So, it's been an 8-year project. We're in 2025. The book itself covers mostly from 2017 to 2022, with our last trip to Serbia with some flashbacks. It comes out on April 23rd, which is Yom HaShoah, but
Yeah.
it's available for pre-order
Was your father
now.
very involved with it?
Yeah. He's excited. I think he's proud. I don't think he thought These childhood stories would one day be a book, that our family pictures would one day be on the internet. It's a little weird, but he's totally on board and has helped me in every way that he could, and my
I'm
mother
saying, did
as
he help
well.
at all with, you talked to him a lot for the research and everything. So did he help out like giving besides giving memories, talking like wanting to help out with research himself? I was just curious.
He's not done the research. No, I've done the research, but he's like, been very interested in everything. Yeah.
It sounds like just such an incredible book and everything. I got the chance to go through it, but it's unbelievable all your experiences that you got to go there. That's amazing to me that you got to go and visit the places itself and that they were welcoming and even to talk about things going on. But let's talk about. I want to talk a little about what you're doing now. Okay, so I was fascinated by this as well. So what's first of all, what's well pregnancy?
Yeah, so Well Pregnancy is my business. I work with families in the childbearing year. So I teach childbirth classes. I'm a lactation consultant. I help people feed their babies. I work with doulas. So very different from what
So
we're
a
talking
lactation
about.
consultant is exactly what it sounds like.
I
So
help people feed their babies. It's like, yeah, it's as promised. Yeah.
okay, so also you have I was looking. You also have another book. Okay, it's an anthology. It's Round the Circle. Doulas share their experiences. So tell me about that book.
Sure. I may be the only person who ever wrote a doula anthology and then a Holocaust memoir. The doula anthology, Round the Circle, I wrote 10 years ago. I just had this idea one day, like, what if a whole bunch of doulas wrote about the things that we know best because we learn things the hard way? Like maybe this next generation could come up and we could make it a little easier for them. And so I reached out to some doulas, some who I knew really well, some who I just sort of knew by reputation, and 22 of them said, "Yeah, we'll be part of this project." It was a great first book. I was like writing in community and I released it in community. And it's the opposite of writing a memoir where you're like, here's my life. I'm so exposed. I'm standing here by myself. So both were very good experiences, but very different.
Going back to Hidden in Plain Sight, again, when you were doing it, was there anything that just really like stunned you that you learned about that during that time that just really that you couldn't believe? I mean, I guess already that you're able to visit the prison or the camp at the time was just incredible to me. Was there anything else that just really stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, so visiting the camp was heartbreaking, and both heartbreaking and numbing. It's a unmowed lot in the middle of the city with two falling down buildings in it. And the first time we went in 2018, not even a sign explaining what happened there. So
So
very
there's no
much.
like markers or anything like this is where this happened. There's nothing like that.
Now there is a single marker. When I was there in 2022, there was a little sign. You wouldn't see it from the street, but if you walked into the yard, you could go up to the sign and see, oh yeah, this is what happened. And that's the kind of denial that I'm talking about. I mean, we think these places must be museums, and in
Right.
Serbia, they're not. We went to the central area, this fort. People go there like to picnic or fly a kite, walk a dog. It's lovely. That's where the Jewish men were rounded up. That's where my grandfather
Uh,
was, not a sign. You would have no idea. And the people who live there, I'm sure most of them, they don't know. It's completely unmarked. So that was very shocking to me. And just overall, here's a fact that most people don't know. More Jews in the Holocaust were murdered outside the camps than in them.
hmm.
I never learned that. Most of these Jews, like my family in Eastern Europe, they were murdered very early. There were not gas chambers. There were not trains. They were shot, most of them,
Uh,
in their towns where they
right.
lived with no one to report because they were all killed. That's the part of the story we don't still don't talk about. There's a million, they call them the missing. We don't know their names. We don't know their stories at all. I'm lucky because I know my family story, but there are many stories that are just lost.
It's on some level. I mean, it stands to make sense. I mean, when you read about all the, thousands in one day that were just rounded up outside the village and just shot into like, pits or whatever. So it stands to
Right.
make sense, but I didn't realize that until you just said it. I didn't realize that
Yeah.
there's
Yeah. If you were rounded up, you didn't survive. If you were standing there,
right.
at gunpoint, that was it. I mean, so families, neighborhoods just
No.
disappeared.
So all right, get to other things. So what are you working on next?
I don't have another book project, maybe in another 10 years. 2025 is really the year for talking about this book. I wrote about Hidden in Plain Sight so that people would know the story of the Serbian Jews. I didn't write it, for my family. I have notes for my family. So really just to get the word out on this other story. All the stories are important, and this is the one I've been handed to tell. So that's the 2025 project.
I'm just keep on wondering about the reaction it's going to be when your book comes out, and I hope it does prompt something. If more will be done in like in that town in particular, I guess.
I mean that's my hope. I mean to somehow force the Serbian government, to I don't know who can do that. I mean they need international pressure. I don't think it can come from within. I think it has to come from without.
Here's hoping because you have a lot of positive reviews I saw already with that as well. So I'm hoping that this at least prompts something or spurs something. So, all right, how can people follow you on social media?
Yeah, so my website is just my name, juliebrill.com, Juliebrill. I have all the links there. I'm most active on Instagram. X not so much, maybe
What are
Blue
the
Skies coming
what are the
along.
what are the names? What are the names on each of the sites that you said on Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky?
Yeah, so I would say go to Instagram. It's Julie S. Brill, S for Sarah. And I've, posting about the book, and also just a lot of information on my website as well.
Fantastic. Julie, thank you so much for joining me. It's an unbelievable story, and it's just an amazing. I learned an incredible amount that I did not know about. And like I said, I read about this stuff all the time, and I was not aware of the things that you wrote about.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jonathan. I just appreciate you sharing your audience with me and, talking about the book today.
No, like I urge everyone to buy it. Again, hidden in plain sight, and just it's incredible there. I got the chance to look through it, so it's just incredible. But again, want to thank you. And this has been The Jewish Lens. I'm Jonathan Rosen. Again, a very special thanks to Julie Brill. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Thanks for tuning in to The Jewish Lens, where all items used was strictly kosher.